In this video, I've put together some tips strategy from board game designers and publishers themselves that should help you in a bit in your games. Coming up. Hi everyone, hope you're well. It's Stella from Meeple University. Welcome to my tabletop diary. Hopefully you've seen other tips video that I've done and find them useful. Otherwise, check them out here or check the description in this video. Now, before I get into it, please write in the comment sections below what you think of the episodes and if there are games you want to be featured in this strategy series or you just want to say hi. If we have video for the games featured here, I will put the links in the description so you can look at our review or how to play or playthrough videos. Also, if you'd like to go to a specific section, I put time index in the description so you can jump ahead. So here are the tips. This time I asked Frank West, the designer from the City of Games, to give me tips of 3 of his games, starting with the City of Kings.
Hi everyone, I'm Frank from the City of Games, and Stella has asked me to come here today to give you guys a few tips about a few of my games, and I couldn't be more excited. So I'm going to start off with the City of Kings, which is this big cooperative puzzle adventure game, and I'm going to help you guys know how to kind of do well in this game. The first thing I want to talk about is the cards. You see, there are lots of different cards in the game, but 2 of the important ones are the quest cards and the equipment cards. And as you play through the game, you're going to see a number of these coming out. And the important thing to remember is not every single piece of equipment is going to be right for you. Not every single quest that you see is going to be something that you're going to want to do. And it's part of the game. You're going to have to decide, is this something worth doing? Is this something worth working towards? Because it's not that every card is going to be perfect, but they're all going to have different situations, and you need to understand when that's going to be right for you. Next up, following on from the quests, I kind of want to just talk about quests themselves. You see, quest cards are a really good way of making XP. Sometimes you're going to find yourself stuck. You're going to think, oh, I can't quite kill that creature, or I can't quite do something. And the quest cards are a good way for you to kind of build up a little bit of extra XP. Again, sometimes you're going to get a card and you're going to think, that one's not good for me, and that's fine. You can use interact actions to get more of these cards and to continue finding more ways to get XP until you're strong enough. So I really recommend, if you're struggling a little bit to kind of take on those bigger creatures, that you do focus on just doing a few side quests once you found the quest location. So third up is temporary structures. Now this is something that a lot of people kind of overlook in the game, and they often don't really consider them as an option, but they can be really, really powerful. For the cost of 8 resource, you can buy kind of the camps, you can buy the traps, you can attack, you can prevent damage, you can heal, and these can really, really help with the difficult situations. Now, I really want to focus on the trap one for the time being, the one that does damage, because you can use these to pre-plan. Let's say, for example, you're about to explore a tile and you think there's a really high probability there's going to be a creature on that space. Now, you can pre-plan and put a trap on that tile, so if a creature spawns, you can instantly do some damage to it. The same applies if you think a boss is going to spawn, or perhaps if a creature's got an ability like teleport, so you know it's going to move to you. These can be really, really powerful, and some of the stories and scenarios in the game are really designed around you using these temporary structures to kind of aid your players in order to overcome various challenges. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is exploration, and this is kind of one of my big tips that I give to people, because exploration in the City of Kings is kind of this, it's a trick. It's designed to make you mess up, because as a player, there's nothing we like more than to move across onto a tile and to explore it, to discover something new. And this is the challenge, because in the City of Kings on a turn, a player can only move once. So if you move onto a space and then you turn it over and you discover maybe it's something bad, in this instance, it's fine, but perhaps it was a creature, perhaps it was something that was going to cause damage to you, you're now stuck on that tile. You no longer have the facility to move away. So really, what you want to do is go against your natural instincts. Don't think about exploring now. Pre-plan. Do something that's going to keep it safe. So how about on my turn, instead of moving and exploring, I simply finish my turn by moving. Now, what this means is when it comes to my turn next round, I can start by doing an exploration. If I now start my turn by exploring, I can turn this over. And if suddenly this tile is really bad, I still have my move action so that I can quickly move away and be somewhere safe. So I really advise you to not just necessarily rush out and turn everything over, but to be cautious and move casually into things and plan just that little bit more. And finally, what I want to talk about is the Holy Trinity. And this is my number one tip. You see, if you've not played video games before, you might not be familiar with the Holy Trinity, but it's at the core of the City of Kings game design. So what do I mean by this? This is the premise of having an attacker, having a tank, and having a healer. Now, an attacker is someone who deals damage. A healer is someone who restores health to people, and a tank is typically someone who's they get in the way, they block the damage from other players, and they absorb it themselves. So if you're playing with 3 players, you really want to make sure that one player has got an attacking base build, one person's got a healing base build, and someone else has got a tank base build. If you're playing with 2 players, you're going to have to think about how you can hybrid those roles a little bit more. And with 4 players, you're probably going to need those 3 roles, and then someone else may be doing a bit of each, or the ones that your particular group find more useful. But the important thing here is you have to remember that the game is designed for each player to have a specialization, and if you don't have that specialization, then you're really going to struggle. So that's it for the City of Kings, and I really hope that's been useful for you. Next up, I want to talk to you about Vadoran Gardens. So, Vadoran Gardens is going to be a 2 to 4 player 30-minute game. And you might look at that tiny little box and think to yourself, this is going to be simple, it's going to be easy. But the more you play it, the more you start to realize that there's a real puzzle hidden inside there. And there's going to be a few things that I can help you with that are going to make that life easier for you. So, number 1. Vadoran Gardens is all about planning ahead. You see, it's been carefully designed where each round you are going to have the current row where you've perhaps selected a card. Let's say that this is the card I've selected, and you're always going to have the next row visible, which is going to be the card you select for your next round. Not only that, but your current lesson, which is going to be restricting what you can do, you can always see the next one. So right now, I know that this round I have to meet this, but next round I have to meet this. The real trick to Vadoran Gardens is look at what's happening next turn. This turn is easy. You know what you're doing now. You've got the cards and you can do it. It's a really simple thing. Next turn is the one that's going to be hard. So continue to plan ahead and really think about what you're doing. Next up, I want to talk about switching terrains, because as you play through Vadoran Gardens, you're going to be building up these pathways and you're going to be trying to connect up terrains as much as you can. But often we get really fixated on that. Perhaps it's because we're working towards an achievement. Perhaps it's just because we naturally want to build up as much of the same color terrain as possible. But let's just have a little think, shall we? Let's say that these are the cards I've got in play, and now I'm going to place a new card. Now this new card is adding 3 grass squares, and that's going to be an additional 3 points. But on top of that, it's also covering 1. So actually by playing this card, I'm only gaining 2 more points. And let's say that I was now to play another card like this, I'm now covering the other edge of that card. So really this card, it's only given me 1 point. And as much as I'm feeling, hey, I want to work towards this, I want to try and get this achievement, I want to build up as much grass as possible, is continuing that pattern really going to give you as many points as perhaps switching and doing something else? Turns out it doesn't always do that. And that's one of the tricks in the game, because we play with your mind and we know that you want to try and achieve something. So we try and make it not necessarily as valuable to do that. So don't be afraid to keep switching terrains. Tip 3 is a fairly obvious one, but obviously not everyone always gets this. So I want to kind of just give you a bit of advice. Let's say that I've got to now choose one of these 4 cards. None of them really look that good to me. I'm kind of thinking, well, I've got some cards in my hand. I'm happy with these. I can meet my next goal. So maybe this one would be okay. Maybe that's the card that I'm going to take, but I'm not really convinced. If you're in that situation, don't take it. Don't do it. Just take the first card, even if that first card is going to be useless for you, because taking the first card is going to make you first player for next round. And as long as you've got a card that you can already play for the next round, that's going to make it easier for you on the following rounds to kind of 2 turns ahead, which is again that forward planning, and it's a really powerful thing to do. Number 2, or I guess number 4 on the list, but number 2 in terms of bottom to most important, I want to talk about lost items. So I mentioned earlier that there's this tendency to kind of continue pathways. I really want to emphasize just how important lost items can be, because we said, this card here is giving us 3 points or an additional 2. When we add this one in here, again, it's giving us just 3 points or perhaps an additional 1 or 2, depending on how you kind of look at it. Over the spread of the cards, it's not that much. But if you manage to get a few of these lost items in play, you're suddenly going to get an extra 5 points. So now these cards have gone from being worth 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to being worth 10 points. You've doubled the value of those 2 cards. And that can be a really good way. And I see a lot of people that don't really think about these lost items early on, but actually they're one of those secrets where if you focus on them a lot, you're really going to push up those points. Because again, if you think about it, how many cards have 5 squares on them that are going to give you kind of 5 points? So if you can get a couple of cards on top of the points from the squares that are going to give you a bonus of 5, that's a really big plus. An extra 2.5 points per card is not something to be ignoring. And number 1, this is the magical part of the game that a lot of people kind of really overlook. And it's, again, the number 7 tablet. Because the number 7 tablet, it's so hard to achieve. You get a bonus 7 points if you manage to get this connected. Now, here's the number 1 trick. You see this card? This card says that the next card you play is going to have to be upside down. And these are designed that if you play them upside down, you're going to be able to easily connect them and transition to another terrain type. So these are the perfect cards to play to transition when you're playing a card upside down, and can be really worth playing around. Of course, you're not guaranteed to get the upside down card, but if you see it there, then this is one of the best ways to boost your score in a single game that exists at all. So I hope that's been really, really useful for you. Next up, I want to talk about the Isle of Cats, the latest game to have come out. And the Isle of Cats, again, is another game where it's relatively small. It takes a bit of time, a bit longer than Vadoran Gardens, but it's very, very puzzly. And I want to give you 5 great little tips that are going to just help you get through that. Now, the first on the list is a very important point, and it's kind of cheating in a sense because it's not really going to help you play better, but it is going to give you a better experience, and I think that's really important. So I really want to remind you that the Isle of Cats comes with both a standard version and it also comes with a family version. And a lot of people look at the family version and go, oh, that's going to be for playing with children, it's going to be playing for kids, and that's true, it is. But it's also for playing with less experienced gamers. When it's the end of the night and you're kind of tired and you don't really want to play another long game. When you're playing with people who are a bit unsure, people who may not kind of enjoy that longer game, the family mode is there designed for them in those moments. When you're going to play the game with people, if they're people you don't know, don't be afraid to kind of ask them and quiz them. Don't always force them to play the more complicated version, because often you might find that the family version is going to be a more fun experience for them. But likewise, if they're more experienced gamers, then perhaps they're going to be ready to dive straight into the full game. So next up, I want to talk about fish. Each round, you're going to get a handful of fish and you're going to be spending these on things. Now, I see a lot of people that make the decision to save fish. They don't want to spend them all. They want to build them up. They want to carry them over. And as much as I understand the logic in that thinking, always try and spend as much of your fish as possible. Always spend them. Every card is better than having fish. Of course, if you've got a strategy for like the next turn that's going to require those extra fish, fine. But this isn't a game where you want to save the fish for later. You want to do as much as possible earlier, because the earlier you are in the game, the more options you've got, the more kind of potential pathways you're going to go down. So the more fish you spend, the more options you're going to have. Whilst if you save them all for the end of the game, you're going to be really kind of hoping the right things turn up, and that's not a great way to play. So I highly recommend that every turn you try and spend as much as your fish as possible. And in a similar note, the next tip is going to be talking about giving yourself options. You see, the Isle of Cats is really designed between a balance of two things. The first one is cats on your boat, and the second one is lesson cards. And you really need to make sure that you find the balance. In your first 1 or 2 rounds, if you get the options, you really want to take 2, 3, 4 lesson cards. There's no specific correct amount, and you can win with not very many. You can win with loads of them. But getting 2 or 3 in those first couple of rounds is really going to help you. Don't be afraid if you think one might be too hard. Don't be afraid if you think you're not going to do all of them. You are better off taking 4 lesson cards and then only completing 3 of them than only ever taking 1 in the first place. If you can achieve these, they're always going to give you that big extra boost of points. So find that balance, and as you play through the game, keep note of what you're doing. Keep note of the options and try and get as many of these lesson cards as possible, because often you'll find the people who do best have between 4 and 7 lesson cards at the end of the game, and then a number of cats that accompany that. And that is something that I think a lot of people should be kind of keeping an eye on. So next up, this is my favorite tip, because a lot of people get tricked by this, and this was kind of put into the game for psychological reasons as much as the experience of the game itself. It's a really fun one. So obviously, as you play through the game, you're going to be putting tiles onto your boat, and you're going to be switching them around and moving them around. And there is nothing more rewarding than getting a bonus for doing something. You know, if I put this tile on my boat, then I put it onto a green treasure map, and that means I'm going to get to take a common treasure, I'm going to get to put it onto my boat, and I have done something great. But the temptation to do that early is so overwhelming. Whilst these tiles, especially these smaller 1x1s, they are so useful at the end of the game. So I suggest that perhaps you don't start the game by putting a green cat onto a green treasure map. Perhaps you start the game by putting a green cat by a green treasure map and leaving that space for another green cat later on. So when you start to have these awkward little spaces on your boat that you need to fill, you can come along, you can put a tile on there, and suddenly you can get those treasure maps and start filling these gaps. And that's a really, really key one. So the last tip, and this is a really important thing to keep in your head, and also if you're teaching people the game, the number one tip to tell everyone is polyomino games. These games where you're putting these pieces onto these boards and trying to fill them up are all based around filling as much of the board as possible, whilst the Isle of Cats isn't. You see, the Isle of Cats, as I mentioned earlier, is about completing lesson cards and filling your boat and finding that balance. So remember, you are not trying to fill your boat. In fact, only maybe 1 in 500 people, 500 times of playing, you're going to see the boat filled, because that's not the optimal way to win. You're going to always have 1 or 2 rooms you haven't filled, so don't be afraid of that. Work towards it and find out a way that you can get that optimal combination. So don't always try to fill the boat. I hope that's helped. I hope that's given you a few useful bits of tips and advice, and thank you, Stella, so much for having me here, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, Frank, for all the tips. Well, hopefully these tips are useful. If you've discovered tips for these board games yourself, please feel free to write in the comment sections below if you like, and watch out for our next episode. If you enjoyed this video, please help us by hitting that like button. You can subscribe to us and hit the bell so you'll be notified of our next videos, including the next in the board game strategy series. Check me out on Instagram for my board games journey, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day.